Welcome to another episode of the Business Builders Podcast. It's the podcast dedicated to the construction and trade industry. Today's guest is the Manager and Director of Northlight Architects, Ralph Cooley. Welcome, Ralph.
Hi, Ray. Nice to meet
How
you.
did you get into architecture?
Well,
What's your journey?
my journey. Well, going all the way back at school, I guess I wanted to be an astronaut. Seriously. But then there was a show on TV at the time. I don't know if you remember, called Howard's Way, back in the 80s.
Was that sailing?
Yeah, it was a sailing show. But there was one of the characters was a developer who rode around in the back of a Bentley, and I thought I fancy a bit of that. That looks good. So I wanted to
I
be.
should have seen that. I should have not gone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly what I'm
episode.
saying. I mean, I wanted to be a developer because I thought that sounds great. Concreting over nature reserves to build marinas. It sounds good to me. But then I went to America when I was 16 on a trip, and I think that was a kind of the clincher. And I realised after that I was more interested in the design of the buildings than the development side, so maybe that's where the road took a wrong turn.
No Bentley yet then.
And also, another factor, I think I grew up in Telford in Shropshire, which is a new town. They were designed in the 60s and 70s to take over spill from the cities. They were designed around the car, and it struck me from quite a young age that I was living in this new town, and really the only interesting building in there was a bridge from the 1700s, and it seemed like a bit of a wasted opportunity, a bit of a shame. So I started understanding a bit more about architecture, and that's what really set me on the journey to do an architectural degree. So yeah, I mean, I went to Portsmouth Poly as it was then, and did my degree in architecture, and it was a real eye opener. I mean, I came from a provincial town, very, very much. My friends were all kind of engineering background. Didn't have much arts education or arts background. I had to prepare a portfolio to get into university, but you're thrown straight into this environment where you have to essentially pin up a work of art and defend it and discuss it. And my first project was a disaster, but it's all a good experience. We had to take a matchbox and make a piece of art which embodied the idea of home.
Oh wow!
So I put a little light inside it and covered it in barbed wire. And so this kind of like sanctuary in barbed wire, and I put it up, and my professor said, "Where are you from? Belfast." And it was a real eye opener. But after that, I did quite well, and it was great to be in that environment where you have to think more widely about things.
Yeah, I was going to say a little bit more
holistically. Yeah. So
you moved on from the
I moved on from that. Yeah. It's still obviously it plays in my mind. But I did well in my degree, and then at the end of my degree, it was 1991, and the first recession, or the
So
first.
how long is the degree period?
It's 3 years.
3 years.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the first recession I'd experienced, and recessions back then were proper recessions, not like now, where that nobody was working. None of my friends graduating from university were working in architecture. They might get a job in a bar if they were lucky, but the wall had just come down in Germany.
Yeah.
So I got on a bus and just went to Germany and knocked on some doors. And I was inspired by a TV show, Auf Wiedersehen Pet, about the builders. I was literally inspired by them. In fact, I went to Dusseldorf because that's where they were supposed to be, but I then later found out it was filmed in Hamburg, which was But anyway, so I went to Dusseldorf and I knocked on some doors, and the first door I came to, they offered me a job, and I got a great salary, a free apartment, high design
Could
work.
you speak?
No,
All right.
no, no. Not when I went. I can now, but I mean, I walked out dazed because it's kind of the dream job.
Yeah.
I was working in the competitions office, doing a lot of mixed-use major schemes for redeveloping East Germany, and some local work in Dusseldorf and the region. And it was very hard work. I got an apartment above the office it was basically the building was semi-derelict, but the office on the ground floor, and I got this massive apartment to myself.
Wow.
But it meant on my days off, I had to walk past the office open door and feeling guilty. But, we pulled all-nighters, we worked, 50 hours straight, this kind of crazy work ethic to get the competitions out. There was one time where I went to bed, thought I'd get a few hours sleep before the evening, and I woke up and then I realised the sun was on the wrong side of the room, and I had to go to work straight away. I thought it was the evening. So it was really, really hard work, but a really excellent discipline.
With the Germans, is it right? They're a lot more committee based. They spend a lot more time in the prep than they do, say, in the UK.
It might be now. That wasn't the case in this office. It was a design-led office, and the chief architect in charge of the project pretty much ran the show,
Right.
and we were just the minions. I did a lot of models, and so you'd have a project for I remember one for an office building, and I did loads and loads of these little polystyrene models of building forms. It's really lovely, actually. Probably about 20 different forms, and then he'd come in with the directors, and they'd talk about which one was the best, and then we'd work that one up. And so it's a great discipline to be part of that team where you have to meet deadlines, competition deadlines. They'd send me, the junior, to the print shop, which seemed like a simple job to do, but I was responsible for getting the prints printed out on time, mounted on the boards, sent to the couriers. If I'd messed up, then the whole project's gone.
No digital software like
no
nowadays.
digital software. No. And, it's interesting. I've seen. We can talk about that perhaps later. I've seen the transition from analog to digital. I mean, I started off on the drawing boards, scraping the ink out with a razor blade and dye line printing and this kind of thing. There was no computers at that time. We didn't use any computers.
But that apprenticeship must be invaluable now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and the apprenticeship in terms of the time, the meeting deadlines and getting the job done when it has to be done, it was useful. But the non-digital side is also a useful thing. I mean, students come out of university now, they can't use a pen. It's really. I mean, they can't sketch. They can't convey ideas without getting on a computer. Not all of them, obviously. Some of them, but you do find that a lot. Whereas we had to convey our ideas without software, and it is I still sketch by hand schemes and very old
Would you
school.
say that gives you a more in-depth knowledge of the actual project itself because you are in some way more involved?
I definitely think there's a hand-eye coordination aspect to design which is lacking now. You can tell when something's been designed on the computer. Sometimes if you sit down with a blank piece of paper and to design a building, if you just pick up a pen, I just start scribbling. And there's a connection there, and out of the scribble comes a form. You don't get that if you sit down with a computer and you have to draw walls and lines, and you just don't get it. And I think that is something that's lacking. Yeah, definitely. So it was an interesting, my career's spanned an interesting time where people who were in university at my time were had this the experience where we've seen the whole transition. I remember the first CAD machine I used, and it was even the communications. We used to send letters when I first started. You used to write letters and put them in the post. And you'd wait a few days.
There's a lot of people listening. Post.
Yeah.
Stamps.
Yeah, post. Yeah, fax machines were around, of course, and that was we had fax machines, but no, there was no computers. So it was an interesting time. It was an exciting time. I mean, it's realised now recently how exciting the 90s were, the early 90s. It was a hugely optimistic period. The world was coming together. The end of history. And
Exactly.
And there is a lot of nostalgia now for the 80s and 90s, even amongst young people, I think, because there's kind of understanding about how innocent it all was when you look at the world now.
Yeah.
And so to be a student at that time was quite, it was exciting. Yeah.
So we're in Germany. You've obviously fell on your feet there by the sounds of things. Incredibly. I'm sure there's a lot of skill went into it and talent, but you fell on your feet there. Where did you go from there? What happened from there?
Well, I took 2 years out. Normally, the architecture degree or the architectural program is 3 years in degree, 1 year out, 2 years in diploma, 1 year out, take your part three. So that's the quickest you can do it.
Right.
So that's your part three architect's exam. But there's variations to that. At that time, they actually gave a waiver on the year out because there was no work. So some people did the whole degree and diploma straight together. But I took 2 years out. So I took 2 years in Germany because I hadn't found a job for a few months and I wanted to stay there. I was earning good money, having a good time.
Nightlife was good then back then, wasn't it?
Nightlife was great. Yeah. I mean,
Reputedly,
the old-
allegedly.
yeah, allegedly, yeah. What stays in Dusseldorf, what happens in Dusseldorf stays in Dusseldorf. No, it was great. It was a really great time, and I wanted to go, but I wanted to finish my course, so I went back to university. But there was my university had an exchange program with Cincinnati in America,
Oh,
and I wanted to go on it, but I'd kind of missed the boat on the application. But our part three advisor, I was in Germany with my friend Ed, and we both missed the boat on our applications because we were having such a good time, I guess. But our part three advisor had to visit people in their offices, so he got a jolly to Germany, and he stayed with us, and we took him out. We got him drunk. We gave him a
back
good
to the
time,
nightlife somehow.
and we said, we both really wanted to go on these exchanges, but we've kind of missed the boat. He said, "Don't worry, lads, I'll sort you out." So Ed ended up going to Melbourne, and I went to Cincinnati. I had a year in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is an interesting university because they have a very vocational approach to architectural education, similar to Bath in this country actually, and we have a lot of Bath students. That you have to work as part of your course. So they split the year up into 4 quarters. You have 2 quarters in university, and then 2 quarters where you have to work or travel. So American university was a real eye-opener, and it was a great opportunity because, as you might know, in American universities, you major and you minor. So you have your major course, which you have to do certain modules on. But after that, you can apply to do anything in the university. So, I did an interactive arts course where I learnt software, which was kind of a precursor of website design because websites didn't exist when I went there.
Back then, yeah.
And a friend of mine did clarinet, and I did film studies where you watch movies and discuss them, and it's great, And then studio, of course, was very exciting to be in a different place and have different ideas about what architecture is. And being the European, I was, sometimes you were kind of. I had one tutor in particular who seemed to think everything I did was great. Not all the tutors thought that for sure, but because I was from England, So I had a great time in America, and so as part of that course, we had the work placement. So 2 of my friends and I bought an old car and we drove across America to California, and we tried to get a job there. There's still recession at the time, so I found a guy called Gary Parsons, who's a small architect practice. He had no work, but he paid me some money to sit and answer the phones, lie on his hammock on the terrace while he's off doing something else, and painted his porch at home. And I did a bit of drawing, but not a lot. But he helped me out, and I worked there a bit. And then I came back to finish my diploma in Portsmouth. So I did a year back in Portsmouth. So after my diploma, I then went back to Germany. I had a girlfriend there at the time, and I still had contacts there. So it seemed like a good idea. So I went back and I worked for a guy called Jürgen Koch, and I worked for him for another 2 years. And funnily enough, he was when I walked into the office when I was first time in Germany, he was the first person I met. So he met me and he said he doesn't think I've got any work, but thanks for coming. And I was walking off down the street, and then somebody shouted after me that the big boss had heard some guy had come from London to work for him. I didn't know who he was, but so he dragged me in, and I was all like, "Oh yeah, I've seen your work. Yeah, it's great." And so his ego was boosted. That's how I got the job. But Jürgen, he said there was no work at first, but he ended up starting his own practice, and I ended up working for him.
Yeah.
So I was back in Germany, and that's when I hit the digital age big time, because he got some software. He started to get into CAD software,
Yeah.
and me being the younger guy was sent to do the course. So we did a CAD course. We had a CAD software called Ribcon, which sounds a bit strange, but it was definitely a CAD software. But it was really interesting because they were trying to do what Revit does now. And if you know, Revit is big
I've
3D software.
Yeah, I know Revit, yeah.
So it was a 3D CAD software, and we were building the models of the buildings in 3D, and we were using 32 megabyte computers, and they just the hardware couldn't deal with the software; it couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
So you'd get these really clunky models which took ages to move, and our computers were high end. You know, I had 5-6 fans. My legs were getting cold in the office because it was heat trying to cool these
That's right, yeah.
processes.
I think that'd be temperatures.
Yeah, but it didn't really work, you know. And I remember when I was leaving the office, they got some young guy in to come and replace me when I was coming back to London. And so I trained him up for a bit, and we had a project in Salzburg for an art gallery. And it's on this hill, this kind of steep hill. And I told him to go and get some cardboard boxes from the supermarket across the road, and we can build a cardboard model. And he laughed at me. He said, "Oh, cardboard model." And the boss didn't want a cardboard model, so he had to build this model of all these layers of sort of landscape levels, you know, in this Ribcon software. And so you had this thing on screen, and every time you moved it, it took like a minute to re-render it, and it was just so clunky.
Yeah.
And that's when, as we were talking about earlier before we started, that, you know, this idea of you know, using the right tool for the job, really, and it doesn't have to be computers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We obviously you've done a lot of travelling. It's really interesting, actually. I didn't realise you'd done so much. Were there any real distinct differences, say, in the culture and the approach? You mentioned more of a vocational way in America, but were you conscious of the differences?
Honestly, no, because to be honest, the great thing about architecture is it seems quite international. I think largely the process is similar everywhere you go. It's a kind of international language. So, you know, I went to Germany. I couldn't speak German, but okay, most people spoke English, but, you know, not all. But there's a kind of an understanding about what you're doing. There's a process that you go through. So I wasn't really conscious of any great differences. I mean, when I came back to work in London, I'd never worked in England, so you know, my basis was in German, working in Germany, really. So I mean, there are sort of legal differences and planning differences in terms of codes and that kind of thing. You know, you work in America, you have a building code, and as long as you follow the building code, there's no need to even worry about approval. You're definitely going to get it. Whereas here, it's never like that. It's a more democratic process. So there's differences in the approach and the technical approach, but the culture, architects seem kind of similar wherever you go. Yeah.
So you've come back to when you've come back to the UK.
Yeah.
Are you working for another practice, or have you started your own practice yet?
Well, no, I started very soon after I came back. So I came back in '98. And I got a job for Arnold and Boston, who are kind of old school London architects, based near the British Museum. Very boozy office. You know, everybody down the pub
Sounds
all the
a bit
time.
like Germany.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, it was shocking, really. It was shocking. No, I remember one Friday I had a meeting in the afternoon, so I didn't drink, and I was sitting in the office thinking, oh my God, is this what we're like? You know, because everybody was.
I think
hammered.
the culture in the construction industry back then was very similar.
Yeah.
In some of the companies I've worked for.
Yeah, my
they
bosses.
did have things have changed for the better in some way.
Yeah. I think so. But you know, what was good about them was that it was a very top-heavy practice in the sense that they didn't have any associates. There was 2 partners, and there was the part twos, and you know, non-qualified architects, if you can put it that way. There's no such thing, but a part 2. So I went in there as a part 2, which is when I've got my diploma, and I was thrown into a job, you know, straight away, running a contract. And they were there if I needed them, but pretty much I was thrown in and I had to deal with it. And so my first project was running a centre for autism, daycare centre for autism in West London, Droop Street. And you I had to. It was getting towards the end of the job, but there were a lot of problems, And I remember getting my head around it and going through the all the minutes. And the first project meeting was the first note was the structural engineer has died, and the second note was the contractor requested structural engineering information. So you could see how the project was going to go. But it was a great experience because I was really thrown in the deep end, and it got me through it. But even then, when I started in London, I wanted to start my own practice, and that really came from being in Germany when I'd be working with my boss on competitions, and I'd have a great idea, and my boss would just kind of, overrule it. No, this is what we're doing. Forget it. I realised that for me, being in a structure like that wasn't going to work. If I have an idea, I want to pursue it really.
Sure.
And you can work in big practices and work your way up the greasy pole, and you get to that position where you have the control. And I'm sure there are practices that are more magnanimous in terms of design than I'd been used to. But I want to design my own stuff. So even while I was working at Arnold in Boston, I began to work with some friends in my spare time to try and build a business. So that was a year after getting there, but 1999, I think I started that. A couple of friends. So we were trying to do some, extension work and small jobs, that kind of thing.
I think generally, I think if you've got any ambition for yourself and you want to run your own company, having somebody who's kind of putting you down, that is incredibly frustrating. But for somebody who's got that creative bias, that must be even worse. Incredibly frustrating for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a prima donna. I don't mind having a design discussion and put my hands up if I'm wrong or somebody's got a better idea. But I thought my ideas were better. We had a competition for in Bonn for the Deutsche Post for a tower, and I had this idea for a spiral skyscraper, so the atrium spirals up around it. I don't think it'd ever been done, and my boss said, no, we're going to look at Foster's tower in Frankfurt and we'll copy that. Basically, no, it's a great concept. We're going to do that.
It's not too creative.
No, I mean, the architects I worked for there, I'm not saying all German architects are like this, but the architects I worked for there, they worshipped Foster. They worshipped him.
Yeah.
I remember my first boss coming in and saying, we want, even we had to stick these people on the drawings and, from trans-text kind of people and things. We didn't have computers. And he's like, I want Foster people, Foster furniture, Foster cars, everything that Foster puts on his, he wants on his. And so we had to do this kind of Norman Foster rip-off, and it was ugly because the proportions were all wrong, and it's quite an ugly building. Yeah. And a couple of years later, Foster comes out with his spiral gherkin, skyscraper, which is exactly what I thought. We could have.
It's nice to know that Foster's copying you. Anyway.
Yeah, Foster's copying me. Yeah, if you're watching this, Norman. Yeah. No, but I realised I wanted to have design freedom, Yeah. A couple of friends of mine, we did a planning application for a contact of my friend in Fashion Street in Brick Lane, and I remember all three of us sitting around scratching our heads over the planning application form. What we're supposed to do here? Never done it in our life, Yeah. And we earned, I think, 300 quid for that job in cash, and we spent it all on our Christmas party. So that's where we started, and we did that in our spare time, really. And then I left Arnold in Boston after I qualified, because at that company you couldn't go anywhere once you qualified, and there's no structure. So I went to work for a bigger company. And I lasted 6 months there, I think, or 3 months, because I'd gone from doing projects, pretty much leading a project for the Imperial War Museum at Arnold and Boston, to doing asphalt details on a office block under somebody who's less qualified than me. Great guy, much better than me in many ways, but it didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
So I was getting frustrated in London, and cost of living and the job didn't seem to be going anywhere. So I decided to hightail it back to America and work with my friend in California again for a year. California had always had a draw to me when I was there for a relatively short time when I was a student, and but it seemed like the perfect life.
When you go back there, you're working now. Are you working within a company, or you've
Yeah.
set up your own company?
No, working within a
Okay.
company. So I left my friends to deal with. We didn't have much work, you know. It was
Yeah.
kind of very ad hoc. So we had a couple of projects, but they were dealing with that, and I could do some work remotely a little bit. That we did have email at that point, you know. So yeah, so I went back to work with Gary in Berkeley, and I kind of got America out my system, I think, then, you know, because I sat there, I sit there listening to BBC Radio London on my headphones, you know, pining for London, you know. So I had a nice time there, and it was a great experience. And Gary's a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, and it was really great. But I wanted to come back to London and get on with things, you know. So that was kind of a stimulus to say, right, I want to get back and really get serious about this, you know. So after working there, I came back, and I changed jobs, and I was very lucky. I got a job with a company called BB Partnership in Islington, and they allowed me to work 4 days a week. And then 1 day a week, I'd work on my own stuff.
With the two guys again, still in that little team of you?
Yeah. And so that's what I did. And then we also, my friends and I, we decided, you know, if we're going to get it serious, we have to. There has to be consequences. So we decided we were going to rent an office, because at least it only costs us $400 a month or something, but it's $400 a month, and you've got to earn some money to pay it.
Exactly, yeah.
So it makes it feel more real. So we rented an office in Clerkenwell, and then luckily my bosses at BB, they would refer me to jobs that they couldn't do. So my first proper client was down next to St James Palace in the Cleveland Row, and it was a job that they had a job next door, and there was a potential conflict of interest with party walls and that kind of thing, because the neighbour wanted something done. Yeah. So they let me do it. And so this was my first proper client, really, not just friends and family and, you know, sort of the odd extension here and there. This was the first proper job.
What was the nature of the work there?
So it's a Georgian house. And there's a small light well at the back against the palace wall. And she wanted it basically turned into a mini atrium. She wanted it glazed over, extended and glazed, so the rain didn't pour in and it was nice and light. So it's simple in some ways, but also there were complexities. Everything's listed around there, you know. And
being so close to the palace, was there any issues that you had to overcome?
Funny you should ask that. Yes, there was.
I would have thought so.
Well, so I did a drawing. So just a bit of context. Behind that part of the palace wall was the art collection. It's like a very sensitive area. Yeah. So I did a drawing where the structure of this atrium came down onto the palace wall. There's a padstone, reinforced concrete padstone. And so I issued this drawing to the contractor with a big note on it saying, subject to party wall agreements, not for construction. Big letters. They rang me up one day, said, yeah, we've just hammered out this wall for the concrete. I said, yeah. And they said, the palace has rang and they want a meeting. So they can hear. So what should we do? So I said, maybe this should be edited out. I don't know. So maybe I think the statute of limitations has ended. I said, well, just cover it up. Whatever you do, let them come around. But wait. So when I went down to site next, a few days later, I said, what happened with that? They said, oh yeah, they came round, but by the time they come round, we just thought we'd put the concrete in and sort it out. I said, so you concreted it in? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, fine. And did you put the rebars in? No, we didn't do that. No. So they had to jackhammer it all out again, you know, and put the rebars in and do it all again. And I almost ended up in the tower for that. Yeah. So, and then, also, you know, that, it was a baptism of fire, that project, really, because you know, I was totally on my own, and the client was she was really nice, but she could be very hot-headed. And
was it your first venture into listed properties as well?
Yeah, I think it was different. Yeah, I mean, I'd done a bit of listed work at my in my day job kind of thing. But yeah, it was. Yeah. So there were there wasn't such a difficulty there. There was one issue where they opened up the back wall of the house and all the structure was kind of charred. There'd been a fire at some stage in the past. This was like a 16th century house or something. And they said, "What should we do? Should we?" And I said, "Well, just it's not gone anywhere for hundreds of years, so let's just cover it up and it's fine." The structure didn't seem to touch the ground, but it was standing. So I don't know. It was a seminal job really for me because it really kind of opened my eyes to. It's the first job I'd really run on site from start to finish as well, I think, and all on my own. I picked up jobs in the office and that kind of thing, but so it was. You have to make decisions, be pragmatic, and there's a danger when you're starting out that you get too dogmatic about everything and make life difficult for everybody, and you realize that you've got to be kind of pragmatic sometimes, and it's give and take. So. Yeah, I mean the BB partnership offered me other work as well, and there was one client that rang up, and one of the associates answered and said, "Oh, she sounds like a nightmare. Can you take it?" So I took it, and she was actually nice, and I got a good job out of it. And these people I even did a little bit of work for them recently. That was 25 years ago, and so they turned into good clients. That was a house extension refurb. So most of my work at that point was domestic extensions, refurbishments, some listed buildings in Islington. So there was a lot of. It was very difficult. There's a lot.
Tends to be that way if you are starting up on your own, unless you're in a big corporate.
Yeah.
Then you do start on those little extensions and you work your way through.
It's a good way.
I think along the way as well, you tend to kind of find your niche. Am I in high-end resi? Am I in schools or whatever?
Yeah.
You tend to find your direction. During that period.
Yeah, you fall into it somehow. I mean, my boss in America told me this, and I realised it's the same for me. At one point, he did a diploma project, which was I think a Moby Dick museum or something, but he did just private residential. And I asked him how he got into it, and he said, I just woke up one day and realised that's what I do. You kind of drift into it, and that's very much the case with me. That I was doing this domestic work, but I realised I didn't want to do that. I found it quite annoying, really. I think now I can handle it a lot better because I've got more experience under my belt. But at that time, you have clients calling you up on holiday shouting at you because the electrician's done something wrong, or they call you on a Sunday because they don't like something the builder's done, and you always feel it's your fault. I always felt it's my fault, somehow.
At my construction company, from my past experiences, we didn't do any domestic work, as was all commercial, for that very reason, because it's so emotive to the client. It's so personal.
It is. And you get into sometimes the husband and wife complications when one tells you one thing, and it's very difficult. And when you're young and you feel I felt sort of responsible for everything. It can be satisfying. I mean, one of the first jobs we did was a young couple with a small family, and it's just a normal London semi-detached house, typical plan. They wanted an extension, didn't really know what they wanted. And I had this crazy idea that they had a garage next door, and I had the crazy idea that we take their hallway, flip it to the other side of the stairs, put it out where it's currently outside between the garage and the house, and extend the living rooms to make them bigger. And when I went in with this idea, they just went, "Oh, we've been trying to figure out which room to make the living room because they're both a bit small, and you just solved their problem." And it's quite satisfying, that you can just improve someone's life a little bit with an idea. But ultimately, I wanted to get out of it. So I also at that time my partners had drifted away. They had young families and career and jobs with more demands on the time. So I was on my own at that time. So I kind of put a Lonely Hearts advert in building design to meet other architects, and I met a bunch to sort of maybe partner up somehow to move things forward. And there's a company approached me from Leeds to be their London office, And there's quite a few northern practices did that actually,
Sure, yeah.
And I tended to push them away. But ultimately, they came down to see me, and the offer was quite good. They said I'd be an equal partner. There were 3 partners in Leeds, 1 in London. They said I'd be an equal partner. They would pay me a small amount for my business. It wasn't huge, but it was something. And then they would sort of get me into a more commercial world, which is what I wanted. So it was a good move originally.
Did you manage to get a lot of autonomy, or was it?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I
Big
did.
Brother?
I had a lot of autonomy. Unfortunately, the 2 founding partners broke up soon after, so it caused a bit of complications. But we got to the point where, the partner would come down and we'd nurture a bit of business. He's very good at kind of getting his foot in the door. So I got my first proper commercial clients. I did some, planning applications for 14 flats here and there, and because the affordable threshold at that time was 15. So, yeah, a lot of commercial work and feasibility work and planning. So it got me into that kind of world, out of the domestic.
So even though you're a divisional MD, I assume, that was your real first taste of actually managing a company as such.
Yeah,
independently.
I had staff for the first time.
Managing budgets. And
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. They sent one of their guys down, then I employed a few people there locally. So it's my first time. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a structured company in the sense of like a big corporation. I didn't have to do reporting and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd have to go to Leeds and justify things, and it got to a point where the practice in London was pulling in as much as the original one in Leeds or more. And some of them were my contacts that I'd known a long time, but because I was in that more commercial environment, it enabled them to give me work, so and I also it went really well for a while, but then the recession started to bite a little bit, or the economy slumped. I think it's 2008.
We had the recession in 07, 08, didn't we?
Yeah, it's after 2008, so things started getting a bit hard. And then the dynamic changed, and the 2 remaining partners would kind of, in Leeds, would kind of sit in a room and decide things and tell me what to do. And I made the point that, this wasn't part of the deal, that I said I wouldn't be a London, a London arm of a northern practice. I wanted equal status, and given that we're bringing in equal work, and there's a point where we had to make cuts on staff, and they wanted me to lose some staff in London. I said, well, we're busy in London. They said, no, send up to Leeds. We've got staff here, because they'd been there a long time, and I said, no, that's not going to happen, and things were really tight, and I was struggling financially because I wasn't getting paid, so I basically told them to stop. I'm not leaving. I'm off. So I set up Cooley Architects then, and it took most of the.
Was it tough? I was going to say, was it tough building that up then? If you were coming at the back end of that recession, did you find it tough to?
No. Well, I was lucky. So one of my original partners from my friends, he'd gone to work for a student housing company, and he was design manager there. Now I tried to get work off him, and he wasn't having it. But we had a coffee once, and he said he was looking at a site, and by chance I'd done a feasibility on this site for somebody else. So I had a oven ready feasibility to go. So that got me in, and so he couldn't really say no then. And that was a huge job. It was a student housing project, and the fees were very, very good, And
is that your specialism now?
It was, but we don't do much at the moment since COVID. It kind of it's died off for us, unfortunately. But that was my first student housing job, and it's in St Pancras, and it was the biggest job I'd ever done. He was nervous as hell because he recommended me, and they're a PLC, so it has to go well. But it did go well. We got planning, and it's built, and it's a very nice project, and it did really well for them. But unfortunately, that came at a strange time where I'd already handed my notice in, And then I got this new sweet job. So I kind of thought that's my job, and it was, but the partners found out about it. And so this was literally my last weeks, and I went to open the server, and they'd taken all the data, and they said, call us, you know.
Oh dear.
But luckily I backed up the data, so I didn't, But so we fell out a bit over that. But I agreed to pay them a big chunk of the fee. I thought it's fair enough.
And you've done that under Cooley Architects?
Yeah. So we agreed that I would take the job, because you can't force clients to go with someone that they wouldn't have gone with the Northern practice. So, but I paid them a big chunk of the fee because I got the job off the strength of being part of them. So it's fair enough. But that so basically when I set up, I rented a little office space. I borrowed a computer. I borrowed £1,000 for the PI insurance, and there was just me and a friend just helping me out a bit. And we were doing this job, this big student housing job. But that enabled me to invest. The profit is very profitable. It enabled me to invest and get some good software, get some staff, and it enabled me to build it up quite quickly. So we did a few student housing jobs over the years, and I was able to build Cooley's up. And eventually we got to about 15 people, and we had an office in Barbican. I had 3 co-directors. Actually, Gabina, who's my current co-director, she's been with me since the start. So she was with me when I was working for the Northern Company. So I appointed her there, and so she became a director of Cooley's early on. So she helped me build that up as well. Then I got 2 new staff members who made directors. So we had 4 directors, 15 staff, and central London office, and we moved to Barbican and got a nice office space there. And it was going pretty well, but then geopolitics kind of got in the way, I guess. And the first thing was Brexit, which was a real disaster for us, because we're literally about to start an office in Germany. Our client was going to roll out student housing in Germany, and we were their architects, so we'd been out there a couple of times. They were going to do a massive, because it was a massive market at that time, because there's a lot of immigration into Germany, and the immigrant population was kind of competing with housing for students, like cheap housing. So there was a real huge demand. So we were about to go great guns and set up an office there, and but then Brexit vote happened, and they just cancelled the whole lot. The PLC, they couldn't take the risk; they didn't want to risk it, so that was dead. And then COVID, we lost our student housing work during COVID. We're doing 2 big projects, and then they were just both cancelled. And so that was quite a big chunk of our work at that time. We've always had lots of developer-led residential projects and other.
Was you having to lay people off at this time?
We laid, we did lay. We laid one staff off, 1 or 2, yeah. So we did have other work.
With the work trailing off, and after having the sort of grown it to a certain level, how did you find that? How did it affect you in yourself? Because I've laid people off. It's tough, and it does affect you.
Laying people off is hard, and I always hated it. It's really difficult. Even people who are really not, really don't deserve to be there. It's really hard because it's very personal. And I did get taken to a tribunal because I laid somebody off badly once. I didn't do it right, but I'm not trained to do it, and I don't have HR people, and we did have to lay, as it was that time, we had to lay somebody off, and he was the obvious candidate. He was, for various reasons, but I still struggled to do it, and I just have to be in the mood. I have to psych myself up, and so I just basically said, "Sorry, we're going to have to make you redundant." So I kind of came out with it. You're supposed to go through all the process and discussions and dialogue. When you're a small practice, a small business, who's going to be laid off. You can go through all that, but it's just box ticking ultimately. this guy's going to go, and you can justify it in many ways. And I should have gone through those processes. I was a bit naive. I laid him off, and then he sort of sued me for unfair dismissal and discrimination. And so he went to tribunal, and I thought, and lawyers sort of suggested you should just pay him off, forget it. But I wanted to go through the process. I remember my boss at BB always saying that if there's any chance to go to court, he would go, because if you ever need to go to court for something really important, it's good to have had that experience.
Yeah.
So we went through the tribunal process, and it was a real eye opener. And yes, technically it was unfair dismissal because I didn't do the process right. So the judge awarded him 1 month's salary.
Right.
But he was trying to get £20,000 off me and he lied to the judge. The judge called him out on it. He lied. It was very embarrassing for him. I was there, and I was quite happy with the result, because I knew I'd done. He cross-examined me, and he said, "So, Mr. Cooley, do you think that you unfairly dismissed me?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And then he said, "No further questions," because I did. I knew it, but I didn't discriminate.
Actually, from a business perspective, looking back now, obviously you've been through highs and lows with Brexit, etc. What would you change if you were looking back in terms of building a business and growing the business? Is there any things that come to mind? You think I could have done that better?
I would have laid people off more when I had to. I think I kept people on for too long.
Actually, there is a saying in business, isn't there? You hire slowly, and you remove very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not good at laying people off. I don't like to let good people go. I always think something's around the corner, because there's always something on the horizon. I can never remember a time I sat there thinking, God, we've got nothing going on. There's always some jobs you've tendered for, and you think you let good people go. It's not good. And so I was very bad at laying people off, and I should have been more mercenary about that. I think it would have helped cash flow, and also a slight naivety about, I was stuck with this central London office with lease, and I was struggling to pay it, frankly, for a couple of years. But I was watching the date when I could get out of the lease. But I think I would have, if I'd known then what I know now, I think I'd have liquidated my company sooner and started again, because it would have got me out of all that, and I wouldn't have just been, struggling to pay all these bills and keep going. It was a very difficult time, and then it was COVID that really, changed things.
Yeah, changed
for me, for everybody
worldwide.
Yeah. But the things that changed for me was the location, because nobody anymore cares about where your office is, and I didn't need to pay that kind of money and travel an hour and a half each way into work and back.
Yeah, in terms of remote working, I'm of the thought process that COVID kind of brought everything forward about 5 years.
Yeah,
because I think we were heading that way anyway.
Yeah.
But with the advent of COVID, then everybody started working remotely, and then people, because there's a large element of trust there, where people, years before, you couldn't work at home, because you had to make sure he's earning his keep.
Yeah.
But then once the employers overcome that, and the technology was there, it was obviously a sensible thing to do.
We had a remote worker. We had Jason in Sheffield before COVID, and we'd have phone conversations. We didn't use Teams or anything. The technology was there. Yeah, we never used it. We didn't have video conferences. COVID really drove that forward. So we lost a lot of work, and things are hard. And so I decided to change the structure. We had too many directors. We were too geared towards the big corporate clients we were chasing, and there's also sometimes a dissatisfaction doing some of the larger projects, that it turns into D&B, design and build contracts, and you lose control, and the final product is kind of
Do you work with many contractors on a DB arrangements?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. But
but is it a certain? Do you determine which project you'll undertake with them, or is it just a relationship?
It's a relationship.
You say, for the sake of this conversation, it can only be student accommodation, for example. Will you determine that, or will you go with anything?
In terms of the design of
in terms of what project they're going to undertake, would you be very? So I'm not working. Say you got the same contractor relationship.
Mm.
One is just for this. One is a student accommodation. One is a high-end
Yeah,
residential.
yeah.
Would you say, well, I don't touch high-end resi, I'm not going to go with that, or would you still keep the relationship and
Oh no,
work on it?
I'd still go with that. I mean, I don't think there's anything we wouldn't touch.
Mm,
Even if you don't have the experience, sometimes you can bring fresh ideas, and
yeah.
you can. It's that we've I've done most types of work in the past. So there's nothing we wouldn't touch. So if the relationships there, we would do it. Yeah. And we do student housing again now. If we had the jobs, and it was satisfying to work on large projects.
Mm,
But the client structure our main student housing client, the structure they had was that you have an architect for the design, and then you have an architect for the delivery,
right.
and you don't use the same ones. And there's a massive disconnect. In my view, a
Mm,
huge mistake. I mean, we did a project in Portsmouth for a student housing tower, and the final result got a design award, but it was a kind of a share. We shared it with somebody else because the judges could see it was really awarded to what the building could have been, because they didn't understand the concept, and we didn't even have a handover meeting. There's no kind of connection between the two, and the architects, good architects who delivered it, but they didn't, or the client perhaps didn't understand it. I don't know, but it was a shadow of what it could have been. Yeah.
Was there a point in time in your development when you kind of realised being a great architect doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a great architectural business from a business perspective? Was there a conscious point where you thought, I'm brilliant at what I do, but this running a business is a little bit tricky?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't claim to be a great architect, but I think I'm a good architect. But but no, yeah, there is it. Yeah, sometimes you think,
Mm,
I just want to design.
yeah.
Maybe I'll just go and work for somebody else and do some designs. But ultimately, it is satisfying to have the control over your life. I mean, that's the other thing about running your own business. You have
Mm,
the control. I don't have to ask anybody if I want time off or holidays, or but there's a trade-off for that. Of course, you end up working a lot more perhaps than you otherwise would. But no, I mean, it's there's there is a disconnect in some ways in architecture, that you can spend too much time on the business and not enough time on design. I think a lot of
mm,
architects, particularly at high level management, will complain about that. Perhaps I mean, some architects like the business more. An architect's mansion has many rooms. You can, there's lots of things you can do in architecture. So but I like the design. I like sitting down with a new project, concept stage. Where do we go from here? That's what I really like, and I don't get a lot of chance to do that.
Would you say then, if you got to a certain size and the numbers can support it, that you'd bring somebody in, say like an integrator, somebody who's running the business side, and you become the visionary, just the head of the business and getting on with the creative side?
I definitely do that. Yeah,
Yeah,
if I
and that
could.
is something you would recommend that people consider.
Yeah, I would definitely do that. Yeah, 'cause I don't consider myself a great businessman either. Really, it's I've managed to get along, but it's yeah, I think there are skills that we aren't taught at architecture school,
Mm,
and perhaps we should be taught more, because most architects, proportionally, most architects do run their own business. I think that even now that most architects are sole practitioners, and we didn't get much education in how to run a business. And so yeah, I mean, if the turnover allowed it, I would definitely get somebody into like a finance director or something to run the
yeah.
business. Yeah, and free up more time.
Does seem to be the way with lots, especially within the construction umbrella. People develop particular skill sets, design, trades, but the business aspect of, because once you get to a certain size, it becomes a business, and you get more work. Then you've got to employ people, like you say. You don't, especially nowadays, employment rules, employment law is a minefield,
Yeah.
and they never really get that business training. It never seems to be part of their own disciplines training.
Mm.
It's something you kind of pick up as you grow.
Mm.
You mentioned that you came to the point where you unfortunately ended up at court, and where did it go from there? Where did Cooley's go from there? because we were talking about you'd come to a point where you had to lay off some people because of the economic times.
I mean the court thing wasn't a critical part of anything. It's more of an aside in some ways. But it got to the point where the office lease was coming to an end. There was a chance to move out of central London. And I realised that gave me an opportunity then to restructure everything. Stop chasing the big jobs. You know, if big jobs come along and they're nice jobs, I wouldn't say no. But don't structure the business to be based on having to get these big construction jobs or house builders jobs, which are very, you know, it can be unsatisfying if you lose control of them. And to focus on what our core base was, which is small developers, you know, developer-led residential, you know, commercial jobs if we can get them, and other little things. But you know, focus on our core base and try again. Is really to try and scale down the business side to have more time on the design, keep things simpler. So you know, we lost 2 directors. We moved to Walthamstow, which is close to where I live. Downscaled everything, restructured. New company name, which is important for me, is kind of a legacy thing, really. That as I'm not getting any younger, eventually I'd like to pass the business on, and I think it helps if the business isn't my name.
Yeah.
You know, if people can feel more like they're buying into it.
So now we're in Northlight now.
Northlight now, yeah. So you know, anybody buying into that in whatever way can feel part of it without it being my name, you know, which is always my intention, really. So we're a lot nimbler now. We're a lot more flexible. We can take on smaller jobs. You've got some quite nice little jobs in the office, which we probably wouldn't have done under Cooley's. Yeah.
Is that lady still with you?
Gabina, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. She's still with me.
Hell of a relationship.
Yeah.
Right. We're kind of coming to the end, but if there's a budding architect out there, what advice would you give them in terms of, say, with their career, any kind of things that you've learned lessons from that you can pass on? Is there any words of wisdom?
I think it's good to find what you really want to do in architecture. You know, find what you're good at, or find what interests you, because it is quite there's a wide spectrum of jobs you can do within architecture and types of architecture you can do. You know, if you like the big fancy international jobs, then you do need to go to one of those practices. And even if you set up eventually on your own, you know, you need to get that grounding. If you want the control over your life and design, then keep it simple. You know, just build it up slowly and small, and do a good job for people. And I think one thing is always treat people well. You never know where your clients are going to come from. You know,
you know, not what you know.
Who you know, yeah. And even if seems very small, might seem a bit annoying, this job, you know, do a good job, because you never know where they're going to go in future. We've got jobs I did a job for a very small builder once. I never even met him. Spoke to him on the phone, and like 4 years later, perhaps I had a call from him on my phone. I thought, oh God, I'll call him back later. I rang him back. He'd gone to work for a much bigger company, and he got a new build 15 flat job for me. You know, so you never know. Treat somebody well, treat people well, and it's karma.
Okay. Well, on that note, Ralph, it's been a pleasure. Actually, the time's gone really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's gone very quick. Yeah,
so
it's been great.
Just like to thank you for your time.
Thank you
for turning up, and great. And hope Northlight has a good few more years and successes.
Thank you.
Within it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.